It started as any ordinary summer day at the community pool. The sun was shining and the water sparkled, inviting everyone to take a refreshing dip. My daughter, Mia, who had been in a wheelchair since birth, loved going to the pool. It was one of the few places where she felt free, even if just for a few hours. As we arrived, I noticed Karen, the HOA president, pacing near the entrance. Her usual scowl was present, and she looked as if she had something on her mind. "Don't worry about her, Mia." I reassured my daughter she's just having one of her days. Little did I know, that day would spiral out of control in ways we could never have imagined. Karen had never liked us. She had a reputation for being overly strict about the pool's rules, and we had crossed paths numerous times over the years. But that day, something about her demeanor felt different, more sinister. She glared at us as we walked past her, and then I heard her speaking to the lifeguard. I didn't catch all of it, but I overheard her mention unsanctioned access and enforcing the rules. I shrugged it off, assuming it was just more of her usual complaints. What I didn't know was that Karen had already decided to take matters into her own hands. She had plans to make us leave, plans that went far beyond anything we had ever experienced. Little did we know, the HOA's rule enforcement was about to turn deadly. As the day wore on, the pool became busier. The air was filled with laughter and splashing, but in the midst of it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Karen had positioned herself near the pool's edge, watching everyone with a watchful eye. She wasn't mingling with the residents like usual, she was plotting. I tried to keep Mia entertained, allowing her to enjoy the water and feel the freedom she deserved. Mia was always in a positive mood, never letting her disability hold her back. But I could see the tension in her eyes, too. Even she had started to notice Karen's strange behavior. Around midday, the lifeguards began making unusual announcements about pool capacity and rules that seemed to be directed specifically at us. I looked around and realized we were the only ones who seemed to be targeted. I felt my blood pressure rise. Why was Karen focusing on us? She didn't have the authority to kick us out, but her obsession with control was starting to wear thin. Before I could react, I saw her walking toward the poolside, her eyes locked onto us. She was holding something in her hand that I couldn't make out from a distance. I knew things were about to escalate, but I had no idea just how far Karen was willing to go. I was talking to another parent when the unthinkable happened. A loud bang echoed across the pool and everyone froze. I turned to see Karen standing at the pool's edge, a gun in her hand, smoke rising from the barrel. My heart dropped into my stomach. Mia, who was sitting on the poolside, was too far away from the water to dive in for cover. She couldn't run, couldn't move fast enough to escape the chaos unfolding around her. She covered her face with her hands, her body trembling in fear. I rushed toward her, pushing through the panic-stricken crowd, my eyes locked on my daughter. The other parents screamed and ran for cover, but I didn't care about anything else at that moment. All I could think about was Mia's safety. I didn't even see the lifeguards rushing towards Karen or the other bystanders pulling out their phones. The pool had become a war zone in an instant, with Karen still holding the gun, her eyes wide with anger. It wasn't a random act, it was a calculated move, one that targeted my daughter, who was helpless in that wheelchair. I reached Mia and shielded her with my body, praying that we could make it out of there alive. The second shot rang out before I could fully process the first. This time, it was aimed at the pool's fence, the bullet ricocheting off the metal and causing more panic among the crowd. The air was thick with smoke, and the once peaceful setting had turned into complete chaos. As I crouched down next to Mia, holding her close, the lifeguards finally took action, attempting to disarm Karen. I could hear the shouts of other residents, but everything felt surreal. The people I thought I could trust, the community I had been a part of for years, had crumbled into utter panic. Mia clung to me, her body shaking with fear. She had never experienced anything like this before. I could see the terror in her eyes, a fear that no child should ever have to feel. And then I realized the cruel reality. Karen had no empathy for her situation. She didn't care that Mia couldn't run, couldn't escape the danger that Karen had brought to our doorstep. While the lifeguards restrained Karen and the police arrived, I stayed with Mia, trying to calm her down. She kept asking, "Why is she doing this, Daddy?" It was the question I couldn't answer. The police arrived moments later, but Karen was already subdued by the lifeguards and a few brave residents who managed to overpower her. As the officers took her into custody, I was left in a daze, processing what had just occurred. Mia, still in my arms, was shaking uncontrollably. I tried to reassure her, but words felt hollow in the face of what we had just gone through. I never imagined that a day at the pool would end in terror, with my daughter caught in the crossfire of an angry, power-hungry HOA president. Once the police had taken Karen away, I was able to focus on Mia. The paramedics arrived shortly after, checking her for any physical injuries, but her emotional trauma was far more profound. I knew it would take time to help her heal, to make her feel safe again in places she once loved. Karen's actions had shattered our sense of security, and I knew that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the days passed, the media picked up the story, and the community was thrown into an uproar. People were horrified by Karen's actions, but many were also questioning how she had gotten a gun in the first place. It was clear that she had been planning something for a long time, but no one ever expected it to turn violent in such a public place. I reached out to the police and began seeking justice for Mia. The legal process was slow, but I was determined to make sure Karen faced the consequences for her actions. I filed a restraining order against her, and we began preparing for the court case. Karen's actions were not just about the pool rules, they were about her attempt to control and intimidate people. And the fact that she had targeted Mia, who had no way of defending herself, only added to the severity of the crime. I was committed to making sure she would never harm anyone again. The case would be long and challenging, but I was prepared. I wasn't just fighting for my daughter's safety, I was fighting for the safety of the entire community that had been terrorized by her actions. Months later, the trial finally began. I was determined to be there every step of the way, standing up for Mia and making sure that Karen would not escape the consequences of her actions. The courtroom was packed with people who had witnessed the chaos at the pool, and I could feel the weight of their judgment on Karen. Her defense tried to argue that she was acting out of a sense of responsibility as the HOA president, but no one bought it. The evidence was clear. Karen had deliberately targeted my daughter, using violence as a means of enforcing her will. The testimonies from the witnesses who had seen her wield the gun only added to the prosecution's case. When it was Mia's turn to speak, I could see the courage in her eyes. She may have been young, but she understood the importance of standing up for herself and others. Her voice shook as she recounted the day's events, but I could see how proud she was of herself for speaking the truth. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was one that would ultimately lead to justice. Karen was found guilty of multiple charges, including attempted assault and reckless endangerment. She was sentenced to a long time in prison, and her position as the HOA president was immediately revoked. Though the legal battle had been won, Mia and I knew that the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. But together, we began to rebuild our lives. We found new places where Mia could feel safe and secure, and with time, she began to regain her confidence. The tragedy at the pool had changed us, but it also made us stronger. I would always protect my daughter, no matter the cost. And as for Karen, she would never have the power to hurt anyone again. Justice had been served, and we could finally begin to heal.